I think it's an interesting conversation, about leadership and what we sometimes we do. Is it weak leadership? Is it poor leadership? And I think sometimes we may misunderstand about what the people that are, what their agenda is, and maybe it's a lack of
Yeah.
communication. Maybe there's just always different things, and I think we have to be careful about how we interpret that.
Why don't we frame it as, you know, hey, being a good leader is tough.
Well, it is. It's really hard, and sometimes people get put in a position maybe before they're ready,
Yep.
and sometimes they don't. They really don't know all this stuff. I mean, good gosh, I started off. I wound up in a position of leadership, and I didn't have a clue.
Yeah.
I've made every mistake there possibly is, and you know, but I think it's just because you have some, and let's just take the premise that they do suck. Okay, let's just take the premise that they are weak or they're lacking in some
They're a
ways.
poor judge of
Yeah,
character. They're a poor manager. Yeah.
in my mind, that does not remove any responsibility from you to give the very best that
Yeah.
you can to do what you're supposed to do. And in fact, it makes it even, it's more imperative because, sometimes we get in that deal. Well, gosh, it's, you know, he or she's always just stopping me from doing what I could do. And every time I take something
Mm-hmm.
to them, they just shoot it down and they do all that. I well, maybe it's because your idea sucks. And I say that genuinely because you and I have both, being in a position where we're at. It happens. Sometimes it's just not a good idea.
Well, brother, there. A lot of things pop into mind. Let's talk about that one. Let's unpack that one first. There's a lot of hits. There's a lot of hits in our world. There's a lot of
Yeah.
misses. There is
Yeah.
some crazy stuff that you and I have come up with. I guess I'm not big on labels, but you could obviously say that we're in a leadership position in our organization.
Well, yeah,
You've been in,
we sign the
you,
front of the
yeah,
check. So
yeah.
yeah,
You,
we're definitely,
you've
if
been
you're signing the front of the check, you're in a leadership position.
You've been in the, yeah, you've been in the way more leadership positions than me. I've been a little bit apprehensive about leadership and managerial roles in the past. I'm a people person. I vibe on people big time. That doesn't make me a good leader. However, ideas are very few and far between execution, or not. Excuse me, they're not very few and far between. Ideas are fall constantly. Execution is the difference between getting them done. You and I have had so many hits and so many misses that I think part of the reason why, I guess it's like our entrepreneurial spirit or something. I forget about the misses.
Well, let's do it let's say it like this. We've had so many at bats.
There you go.
We
Yeah,
we've
yeah,
been
yeah.
we've
Exactly.
been to the plate a lot. Well, we've been to the plate a lot and we've struck out a lot. But here's the thing, and very seldom do you really hit a home run. Most of the times it's singles and doubles. But this is the thing.
Totally.
This is the one thing that I think that we are good at that we do is let's say somebody does bring an idea, they bring something to us. I am so over the top with gratitude for the fact that they took a risk, that they reached out, that they put themselves out there to come
They
at
feel
us.
comfortable. They have an audience. Yep.
Even and that's the part. Even if the idea sucks, and it does happen a lot, and I'm just telling you the way it is.
It's
A
fun.
lot of times
Yeah.
they'll bring us somebody brings an idea. One of our team members, they come out and do it. I'm so overwhelmed the fact that they did it, that they put themselves out there to do it. That's the part I want to acknowledge and do it, even if the idea sucks.
Yep. They're engaged. I think that's the really
because
cool part of that.
because you don't want to stop that, because if you're a leader and if you're in a leadership position, um, you need to realize that it took a lot for that person to reach out, to step out there. And just because their ideas suck doesn't mean that all their ideas are going to suck, and that they're going to come across with something that's going to be good or maybe that works out well, and you've got to be able to take them up on that. And I think that's the difference. Where maybe early in my career, I probably didn't acknowledge that enough because I was hanging on by a thread anyway. So, I just didn't know any better. And so I'm all of a sudden I'm put in this position, and I thought I was smarter than what I was, and I thought I was the smartest guy in the room. And even if you may be the smartest person in the room, you're not the only person.
Yep.
And that if your team's going to grow and thrive, you have to foster that. You have to reach out to them and ask them for that information and be able to take it. And so that's where I think from the leadership side. But from the other side, I think you can't use that. Don't let that become an excuse. I mean, I was in a position where I had leaders who were weak.
Mm-hmm.
I've been in that where they just weren't weak. And so what I learned to
Mm-hmm.
do is I'm going to use this. I just kind of manipulated the situation. I
Yeah,
didn't.
you're still doing your job.
Well,
Yeah.
I did my job the very best I could do. I would
Mm-hmm.
put them in a situation to succeed if I could.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, I did not become confrontational with them because that doesn't. You
Mm-hmm.
never win in that deal, especially when somebody
Mm-hmm.
thinks that. Because this was in the civil service. I was a firefighter. And I was a
Yeah,
firefighter
I was
for
gonna ask you
12
for some
years.
examples like that.
And I had an officer who just wasn't good. He sucked. I'm just going to say it
Mm-hmm.
like it was. It wasn't that he was a bad guy, but he just was not a good leader. And so what I
Mm-hmm.
learned how to do is if I was confrontational with him, if I did that, well then I could be, I'm insubordinate because,
Mm-hmm.
he's the captain, at the time I was a corporal. So
Mm-hmm.
in this one situation, but what I learned to do is I just put him in tried to put him in a situation to succeed.
Yeah.
And if I could help him to succeed, then
Yeah.
we could get the mission done. We could go put the fire out. We could make the rescue call. We could do whatever it was we could do, and instead of trying to trip him up. And I think that's where a lot of times people go wrong because they don't think people are going to see it. And the fact is, it's very apparent.
Mm-hmm.
We see that in our world where it's really apparent. There, you can't. You always have this thing of the bad leader that takes the credit for all the good stuff that's happening, and puts all the blame on other people, and that's kind of this the movie type stereotype. But the reality is, in real life, it's very apparent to all the people around who the weak leader is. It's very apparent.
We were gonna frame this episode to be about weak leadership. It's gonna be more about um, seeing it from both sides and from a staff perspective, from a leadership perspective. I think big picture, it's very interesting. Something was taught to me a long time ago. You never know what the other person is going through and how, obviously if you can meet them where they're at in your famous words, I think that's fantastic. I
Mm-hmm.
say that to myself just about every day. And understanding what that person has to go through if they're a leader, for instance. Leaders, that's their job. Their job is to understand the staff roles, and descriptions and whatnot, and what's expected out of those folks. Um, some hallmarks of good leadership that have been proven to me over time. One thing that was told to me was that a good leader is never afraid to say the unpopular thing if it's the right thing for the organization. I
Mm-hmm.
think sometimes folks get really caught up in that, and they don't always like the response or what they're hearing. And another thing that's also been very very apparent to me in my experience is that the difference between like a we've all seen it, a busy organization and an organization that is resting on its laurels and sitting back and doesn't really have to push the puck, so to speak, and play offense. There's a
Mm-hmm.
big difference between how that organization looks. If you're driving the mission, if you're driving your organization, if you're growing your company, there's not a lot of time to him and ha about what he said, what she said, this, that, and the thing. We're all driving towards one common goal. I feel like we have that, and we fostered that at our company. I'm proud of that. But it's also another thing that popped in my mind, Jay. And we've heard this from other people too. You and I listen to a lot of the same content, which stuck with me big time. I've had this conversation with some team members recently. I know you have them. When things happen, it's our fault. When things happen that aren't favorable, you and I were having this conversation yesterday. It's my fault. It's your fault. It's our fault. If something, you know what I mean? If someone made a blatant mistake, you know what I mean? But if we set up a system where someone failed, that's our responsibility,
Yeah, yeah,
man.
and
You know what
and
I
and
mean?
that's a leader. One of the best leaders I ever had. Back to the fire department. So he was a major that I worked. He was a major I worked for. Um, he wasn't the best firefighter. He
Yeah.
wasn't the most aggressive, rescue guy and doing all the stuff. He'd been on the job for a long time. But what he did is he took ultimate accountability for his crew and his station, and that's what the deal was. Now he could chew butt with the best of them. He could give you a chewing, and you knew you'd been chewed. But nobody else could do that. And chief didn't matter who they were. He was not. It was like there's a chain of
These
command.
are
If
my
you've got
guys.
something, these
These
are
are my
my
guys.
guys, and
Yeah.
I'm gonna take care
Yep.
of them. And I think
Yep.
that's one of the things that people get caught up with is taking accountability, and to understand. And I'll give you another example of that. when I was sitting on when I was a firefighter, we call it riding the tailboard, sitting in the back. Um, you'd always go to this. You'd go on a call at 3 o'clock in the morning, an automatic alarm, and that means that's just where the fire alarm goes off. They send the fire department out. It's like usually to large buildings, industrial, something like that. And you just automatically go out there, and you go out there and you look at it. Winds up being nothing. There's no
Hmm.
issue, and then you go back and get on the fire truck and go back to the station, go back to bed. But when I was on the back, there'd be those times I'd be like, "It's nothing. Let's go. Let's go. Let's get back to the
Hmm.
station. Get back to bed."
Hmm.
Well, all of a sudden, whenever I became an officer and I'm sitting up front and the responsibility is mine, I was like, "No, we're going to go ahead and look and check this out because if we leave and this thing burns to the ground, it was my fault, and we got to do that." So, I think it's a lot easier to be critical of leadership when you're sitting there not bearing that burden versus when you are bearing that burden. It is a lot different.
That's what I
And
mean about not knowing what's going on in someone else's head and what they're dealing with and what they're
yeah,
pulling. What their cross is to bear, so to speak.
well,
Right?
and I think too, and there are exceptions to this. I mean, there are leaders there are people in leadership who are vindictive, they're mean, they're doing it. And if you've got one of those people and you can't get out of, then you need to leave and go get another organization.
Yeah, they're
I'm just
leading out of fear, which is never the right way to go about
but
it.
yeah, but
Yeah.
they're just it's intimidation and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, and if you're sitting in a situation like that, maybe that you need to go. Yeah, it's time to go and find another
Your
organization.
happiness is worth more than that. That's for
Well, and I've
sure.
heard
I've
people,
been in
I
those spots
love the
before.
cause and I just really love what we do, but my leaders, I'm like, then do something about it. I don't know what to tell
Yeah.
you, but you're just shooting yourself in the foot continuously if you're putting yourself through that.
Yeah.
Go find somebody who's going to use your skills. But the other thing is, I think a lot of times we have this idea that we're the center of the universe, we're the sun, and everybody. And what I
Mm.
mean by that is,
Yeah.
we think that they're well, Trevor's always plotting against me. He's always sitting there just thinking about ways
Sure.
to make my life hard. And the reality is, he isn't thinking
Yeah.
about it at all.
Sure. Yeah.
He he's not thinking
You're
about me at
occupying
all.
zero rent,
Yeah,
zero real estate in your
yeah.
mind. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
not happening at all. They're not thinking about how they can make your life miserable, and they're not sitting there
Yeah.
thinking about how they can make it harder on you.
Yeah.
A lot of times, they're just trying to get the job done,
Sure.
and there's a lot of responsibility comes with that when you're the main person. And
Yeah.
for all you executive directors out there that take on these roles, whether you've got 3 people reporting to you, underneath you, or 30
Yeah.
or more than that, it is a
Mhm.
lot of responsibility. And the buck stops with you. You've got a boss that you report to that's a board. You don't really have a profit statement that you can go and look in sales and all these other things that you can, to do. And so you've got to figure out how to do what you can. And you've got this,
Right.
all these people pulling at you, donors. And I call it the Stretch Armstrong syndrome, which is nobody knows what that is anymore, but it was a toy
Hmm.
that you'd grab the arms and legs and stretch the heck out of, a
Yep.
little doll
All
thing.
different directions. Yep.
And
Yep.
that's how they feel.
Yep.
And they're being pulled between donors, they're being pulled between the clients that you serve, they've got the employees have a hold of you pulling one way, and then you've got board members, committee members, all these things, and then plus anything they've got personally going on. So they're really being pulled in a lot of different directions. So um, you know beware of the uh, just remember the saddle of responsibility gets really burdensome sometimes.
Yeah, we get a lot of feedback, especially on our webinars, from folks going, my board, my committee, my ED, my CEO. And so, like I said, we were going to frame this around like, are you dealing with a leader who's a curmudgeon or a lame duck or whatever? But
Mhm.
we decided not to go that route because there's always there's always multiple viewpoints, and there's a lot of people driving the ship, so to speak, right? There might be one person at the helm, but there's a lot of people driving the ship, and just being aware of that and being self-aware, I think, is a wonderful quality, and knowing what you're good at and understanding what you're good at and utilizing those skills and for the betterment of the organization and those that you're serving, just as a friendly reminder, of course,
Mhm.
is never bad. As
Yeah.
Jason mentioned previously, and I'm a huge believer in this, if you're not fulfilled, if you're feeling like you're pushing a rock up a hill, it's a heck of a lot easier pushing a rock downhill than a boulder downhill than it is uphill. So, if your happiness and whatnot and creative freedom and professional, worth is being questioned and things of that nature, we highly recommend cutting bait and moving ship, you know?